what's coming up on your horizon. We'll mention global warming and you can get a variety of reactions. Today, we will explore why that has come to be and visit with a scientist at the center of what has developed into a political storm over climate change. And what he has to say just may surprise you.
I'm very sympathetic to people who work in the fossil fuel industry who understandably feel threatened when scientists like myself say we've got to change the way we're doing things.
Stay with us for a show you don't want to miss.
Oklahoma Horizon is made possible by the Oklahoma Department of Career and Technology Education.
Oklahoma's investment in Career Tech provides more than nationally recognized technology education and training. It produces solid financial returns for the state's economic future. Oklahoma Career Tech, elevating our economy.
And the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping good people grow good things. And now, from the Career Tech Studios in Stillwater, here's your host, Rob McClendon.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us here on Horizon. Well, despite growing evidence to the contrary, roughly 3 out of every 8 registered voters in the United States believe that global warming is a hoax. According to a new national poll, when asked, do you believe global warming is a hoax or not, 37% of Americans say they do, while 51% say they do not, while 12% of those surveyed say they are just unsure. From rapidly shrinking sea ice in the Arctic to increasingly violent storms in the middle of America, few argue our weather is changing, but is man to blame? According to social scientist Riley Dunlap, how one answers that question is as volatile as our weather.
It's really important to understand that it's become terribly politicized, and the science has sort of been overwhelmed by the politics.
In fact, when you ask Americans whether global warming is real, 77% of Democrats say it is, while 12% believe it's a hoax. By contrast, when you ask the same question to Republicans, those numbers flip, with only 24% believing in global warming and 61% saying it's all a hoax.
But sadly, in this politicized environment, a lot of folks, rather than talk about the policies, they want to attack the science and say, no, there's really no problem. And I think that's not a good place for us to be.
So Riley, along with scientists from Penn State and Michigan State Universities, took part in a climate change forum to look at the gap between the overwhelming global warming consensus in the scientific community and the growing skepticism of American conservatives. Social scientist Aaron McWright.
In the environment. So now what you have is much more ideologically based denial, so that acknowledging the reality of climate change, acknowledging the fact that we have to do something about climate change, which likely means government regulations in the market, indicts an entire ideology of faith in the free market, of limited government intervention. And that sort of triggers this ideological response of, wait a minute, these ideals that I hold true, free enterprise, limited government intrusion, individual liberty, private property, these are being challenged by the reality of climate change, because the reality of climate change means I have to do something about it, or the government has to do something about it, until someone comes up with a free market solution to dealing with climate change.
Which could be a tall order. By its very name, global warming is a global issue, and one whose solution won't be found in a single country, let alone a single industry. Now, later in our show, I sit down with the climate scientist whose theories on climate change have made him a favorite target for global warming detractors. But when we return, an open letter to the President of the United States from an Oklahoma farmer.
You're watching Oklahoma Horizon, featuring some of the good things that are happening in the great state of Oklahoma.
Well, farmers, for the most part, they are a conservative bunch. So it comes as no surprise. While many acknowledge recent weather has changed for the worse, most farmers don't believe humans are necessarily its cause. So it did come as a surprise when here in the reddest state in America, a sixth-generation farmer from Loyal, Oklahoma, penned a plea to the President of the United States to do more about climate change.
Mr. President, I know there's a lot you're going to be covering in your State of the Union address
Meet
this
Clay
year,
Pope,
but I want to make sure you don't overlook climate change and its effect on agriculture.
an internet sensation and a bit of an outlier in agricultural circles, when he published a video to YouTube asking President Obama to not overlook climate change and the possible ramifications it could have on our nation's breadbasket.
According to the report, increases in atmospheric carbon dioxide, rising temperatures, and changing rainfall patterns will affect productivity in the coming decades. The droughts and downpours will be more common and more destructive, and in the future, we may not be able to grow many crops where we grow them today. The report says it's imperative that we act now to prepare for this if we're going to continue feeding ourselves and the world.
I caught up with the one-time state lawmaker and now executive director of the Oklahoma Association of Conservation Districts at our state capitol.
The bottom line is this is an issue that we need to talk about. And I think really and truly when you've got someone who does have the bully pulpit, someone who has the chance in their second term to say something about this and start a conversation on this issue, I felt like it was important that agriculture weigh in because we actually have a bigger role to play in this and we realize the climate continues to change. It's going to negatively affect us more than any other industry.
According to Pope, his plea is as much to his fellow farmers as it is the president. Many in the agriculture community are reluctant to believe the growing scientific evidence that humans are altering our climate. And for many, it just comes down to money. From the tractors they drive to the oil-based chemicals and fertilizers they depend upon, increased regulations on fossil fuels will hit farmers especially hard.
We can't pick and choose the science we want. If science tells us that we've got a challenge, then we've got to recognize that, and we've also got to realize that sticking our head in the sand is not of a benefit to our industry.
Now, Pope is the first to tell you his plea did not sit well with some of his friends and neighbors. Yet he still believes global warming is an issue we need to stop cussing and start discussing. Now, we have a link to Pope's entire video, plus much more on climate change on our website. There, I have my conversation with global warming's chief congressional critic, Oklahoma's senior senator, Jim Inhofe. I visit with some scientists at the National Weather Center about the prospects of more sweltering summers. I examine how our attitudes towards climate change differ here in the United States than they do in Europe. And we visit with a researcher who has looked at how the debate over global warming has even made it all the way into our children's books. Just head to okhorizon.com and click on any of these stories under our value-added section.
Up next, a conversation with the Nobel Prize-winning scientist and author of The Hockey Stick and the Climate Wars, Michael E. Mann.
Michael E. Mann, thank you so much for joining us here in the studios.
Thanks, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
I want to take you back to a time when you were still a young scientist and the climate change debate was a scientific debate and not a political football. And one of your fellow researchers said, boy, these numbers look like a hockey stick. Take it from there.
Sure. So at the time that we published this graph, in fact, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was already on record in concluding that human factors were responsible for the observed warming. So we already knew at that point that there was a detectable human influence on the climate. But scientists were still debating, and to some extent are still debating today, the precise magnitude, for example, of how much warming we expect in the future if we continue to burn fossil fuels and raise CO2 concentrations. There are still uncertainties in the science that are important. If we are going to adapt to changes in climate, we need to know what's coming. We need to know, for example, in Oklahoma, how much warmer are the summers going to get? How much worse are the droughts going to get? Will the droughts of the past few years become the rule rather than the exception? Those sorts of questions rely upon subtle aspects of the climate system where scientists are still working out the answers. So we know that the globe is warming. We know that it's because of human influence. The burning of fossil fuels increased greenhouse gas concentrations. We know that sea level is rising. We know that certain regions are getting warmer summers, are getting worse drought. But how bad will it get? That's still an open question, and there is still uncertainty, and scientists are working hard to resolve those uncertainties. That having been said, uncertainty isn't an excuse for inaction. Uncertainty cuts both ways. And what that means is, in some respects, the climate models that we use are actually underestimating the changes. The sea ice in the Arctic is disappearing faster than the models predicted it to. So uncertainty can cut in either direction. And it turns out it's not a reason for inaction, it's actually a reason to take action because of the possibility of changes that are even far worse than what we're currently predicting.
Oftentimes when I talk to people on the other side of this issue, they will say, well, what happens if they are wrong? We're going to spend all this money and it's really not going to do us any good. My question to you is, what happens if you are right and we don't spend any money and we do nothing?
You know, it's sort of like an insurance policy, fire insurance. We don't take out fire insurance on our homes because we think our homes are going to burn down. We take out fire insurance because in the rare event, in the unlikely scenario where our home does burn down, it would be catastrophic if we had not hedged against that possibility. And that's why we purchase fire insurance. So think of mitigation, think of reducing our carbon emissions as a sort of planetary insurance policy. If we don't do that, then what economists who've done very sober analyses of the costs of action versus the cost of inaction, what they tell you is that if we go beyond, say, 2 degrees warming of the planet, 2 degrees Celsius, it's about 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit. If we continue with our business as usual with our current pattern of fossil fuel emissions, we'll be there in a matter of decades. So if we're going to avoid crossing that threshold, we need to begin reducing our emissions fairly quickly. If we cross that threshold, many scientists who look at the impacts of climate change say that's where we really commit to some of the most damaging impacts of climate change. Far worse drought here in Oklahoma and heat here in Oklahoma than anything we've seen before. Far worse flooding of our coastlines because of sea level rise. The costs of inaction quickly become far greater than any cost of taking action. And so yes, there is a cost in making that transition to a new energy economy. And there are new opportunities that'll emerge as well. But the cost of doing nothing, again, the most sober economic analyses, very conservative economists who have looked at this problem have said the cost of not acting is far greater than any cost of acting.
Now, 3 degrees doesn't sound like very much. Why does that make such a large difference?
Well, if you think about the last ice age, 20,000 years ago, when glaciers came down into where I live in Pennsylvania, covered Pennsylvania, parts of Pennsylvania, covered New York City, dramatically different global climate. That was a difference. That was due to a difference of only a few degrees, maybe 4 degrees Celsius, lower temperature globally, but regionally the impacts were much greater. And so when we talk about, say, a 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit warming of the globe, which is something we may commit to in a matter of decades, we're talking about probably more like 7 degrees Fahrenheit or 8 degrees Fahrenheit over the center of North America. We're talking about twice that much, maybe 10 degrees Fahrenheit warming of the Arctic and a loss of Arctic ice and dramatic changes in that entire ecosystem. And if you look at just the modest warming we've seen so far, less than a degree of warming so far, less than a degree Celsius, a little over a degree Fahrenheit warming of the globe over the past century, and yet in the last decade, we saw a doubling in the incidence of all-time records for heat in the US. In the past 2 years, those records are now running 10 to 1. We're seeing 10 times as many record-breaking heat events in North America than we would expect in the absence of global warming. So we are already stacking the deck, or if you like, loading the dice towards far more extreme weather events, whether they be extreme heat and drought in regions like Oklahoma, or extreme flooding events in part of the Northeast where I live. Even a relatively small change in global temperature translates to huge changes in regional patterns of climate and weather.
So this is a different time than even when we saw the warming period during the medieval ages, or even the high CO2 levels of when the dinosaurs roamed the Earth.
Yeah, so if you go back, to when dinosaurs were roaming the Earth, go back to 100 million years, the early Cretaceous period, when dinosaurs were roaming the planet. CO2 levels then were certainly probably several times higher than they are today. The globe was substantially warmer than it is today. And some people say, well, so we've had these natural periods of warming and higher CO2 concentrations. Well, we'll just adapt, like life did back then. The problem is the rate of change. So it took nature 100 million years to bury all of that CO2 that was around during the Cretaceous period through natural processes, bury it underneath the ground. And nature was able to evolve to a long-term change in climate that took 100 million years. What we're doing right now is we're going back to the early Cretaceous climate, but not over a time frame of 100 million years, by unburying all of those fossil fuel deposits that were laid down over a 100 million year period and putting it into the atmosphere on a timescale of decades. We are literally warming the planet 1 million times faster than those natural events were warming the planet in the past. And so that's the problem. It's the rate of change. We are warming the planet and changing the climate at a rate that nature has never been asked to adapt to before. And there's credible evidence that that rate of change exceeds our adaptive capacity, that living things and civilization cannot adapt to changes that happen that rapidly.
Now, we sit here in the middle of energy country. What do you say to those people that may work in the oil and gas industry that say if we do put a carbon tax in or anything that would disincentivize the use of fossil fuels, it's going to turn, it becomes not an academic debate anymore. It becomes a debate about jobs.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic. I'm from a fossil fuel state myself, Pennsylvania. A coal state. Oil was discovered in Pennsylvania, and of course we have a large natural gas industry that's emerging. So in some sense, my own home state of Pennsylvania is dealing with very much with the same issues that Oklahoma is dealing with. And I'm very sympathetic to people who work in the fossil fuel industry who understandably feel threatened when scientists like myself say we've got to change the way we're doing things. We need to understand that it's not something we can, do today. It's not like we can go cold turkey on our use of fossil fuels for energy. What we need to do is put in place incentives that smoothly transition us away from fossil fuels slowly into other sources of energy, and to make sure that there are jobs for people in the energy industry, so that those folks who were working in the fossil fuel side of the energy industry, there will be jobs for them in alternative energy production. There's an interesting debate taking place today about the role of natural gas.
And I want to ask you about that, because what has that done to this debate? It's easy to hate imported fuel from countries that particularly don't like us, but it's not so easy to be skeptical of something that looks like we have a century's worth of supply that's all American made.
Right, and I sometimes find myself on the other side from my colleagues when it comes to this issue of natural gas. I think a credible argument can be made that it may be an important part of that transition that I described, that in order to get to where we need to be, say 30 years down the road, where there are credible calculations that have been done, that in 30 years, we will be able to scale up wind and solar and other renewable energy technologies to the point where we can essentially get all of our energy needs from them. But we need to find a bridge to 30 years down the road. How do we get to that point? And we will need to be making a transition from a fossil fuel-driven energy economy to a renewable energy-driven economy. Part of that transition may involve moving from a reliance on coal, which has a pretty heavy carbon footprint to natural gas, which it turns out has about half the carbon footprint. So for every watt of power that you get out of natural gas, you're putting half as much CO2 into the atmosphere as if you're burning coal. And that's a significant improvement. In fact, it may be part of why we saw last year that there was actually a drop in U.S. Fossil fuel emissions, U.S. CO2 production. Energy industry experts say that that was due in part to the transition that we're already making from coal to natural gas.
What do you say to those that would believe that we can do everything we want, spend as much money as we can in this country trying to solve the problem, but as long as they're putting a new coal plant online in China and India every few days, we're just kind of wasting our time?
Well, I'm sympathetic to that argument. We are in an unusual sort of place in history right now where certain countries like the U.S., no doubt we have benefited tremendously from 2 centuries of access to cheap energy, fossil fuel energy. It's part of what's made us so prosperous. And other countries like China and India who are just coming online with their energy economies say to the U.S., well, you had your turn. You had 2 centuries of access to this stuff. We deserve our turn too. To me, what that means is that we have to have some moral authority. We have to have the moral authority to be able to tell them that, no, we do need to do things differently now. And we won't have that moral authority if we're not willing to engage in meaningful efforts ourselves to deal with the problem of our carbon emissions. And so in order to have the moral authority to negotiate with the Indias and the Chinas of the world, we need to have our own house in order when it comes to our commitment to solving this problem. If you look at China, as you say, yeah, building a coal-fired power plant every 4 or 5 days, but at the same time, investing far more in renewable energy technology than we are here in the U.S. And in fact, China announced that they are going to be instituting a carbon tax. So they have actually decided that climate change is a big enough threat to them, even given their reliance on coal and fossil fuel energy, that they're willing to take some measures to try to put in place the incentive structure that helps us shift away slowly from our reliance on fossil fuels towards non-carbon-based energy.
And it seems as if this debate is almost spread into the realm of not just something about energy, but something about people's worldview, about how we approach everything that we do in the world.
Right. Well, there is a certain segment of the population that doesn't accept the reality of climate change. And despite the fact that the U.S. National Academy of Sciences is firmly on board in saying that this problem is real and it represents a challenge, the national academies of all the major industrial nations are on record in stating that climate change is real. It does represent a threat. So the world scientific community has said this is a real problem, and we need to think about what to do about it. And yet there is a certain segment of the population that prefers to disregard what the world scientists are saying and instead subscribe to the idea that this is an elaborate hoax, that somehow it's part of an effort to establish, a new world order. You sometimes hear that climate change is just a way of taking away personal freedom and putting in place a United Nations new world order. Well, if that were true, then why would the World Bank, which was founded to fight the spread of communism, why have they gone on record in stating that one of the greatest challenges that we face is climate change? Why have all the major industrial nations, the leading free market-driven economies of the world, why are they on record as in stating that climate change is real? We need to deal with it.
Dr. Mann, thank you for being in our studios. Michael E. Mann is a climatologist and the author of the book, The Hockey Stick and the Climate Wars. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Next time on Oklahoma Horizon, it's easy to get sticker shock when you're filling up, unless you're driving a CNG vehicle.
I have to fill up a little more often now with CNG because I have a smaller tank, but the price advantage is such that, you don't want to burn gasoline anymore if you don't have to.
compressed natural gas in Oklahoma's energy industry on Oklahoma's Show for the Heartland, Oklahoma Horizon. Finally today, a personal note. I want to thank each and every one of you for the cards of condolences for the passing of my mother. I'm overwhelmed by the sheer number and the sentiments inside each of them. Mom was a fabulous woman, like all mothers are. But one of the things I'm most proud of is her stories of the Dust Bowl I've been able to share with you. Words do not adequately describe the respect I have for my mother's generation. Time and time again, they showed a character and a fortitude we can still learn from today, which is why I've included my mother's Dust Bowl stories on our website as not just a remembrance, but as a guidepost. I'm Rob McClendon. Thanks for watching, and thank you so much for all the warm thoughts. See you next week.
Horizon is made possible by the Oklahoma Department of Career and Technology Education and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping good people grow good things. Thank you for watching Oklahoma Horizon.